Hey guys, welcome to the Build Insite podcast. Got another episode with a really great guest today. We've got Katie from Profit First joining us. So as we know, a lot of people in the building industry have become builders, have come from a trade background. So business might not come as first nature, but our conversations with Katie today are going to be some great insights into a profit first business. Katie's got bookkeeping and accounting background. So Katie, thanks so much for joining us. Let's get started.
Collaboration, I think, is a really important word. And typically, if we go back even 5 years in the trades building industry, you'd have some collaboration between some mates, but it wasn't really something that was done very often, I think. And I think that's what has caused so many issues within the space. Yet nowadays, and with things like Build Insite, like collaborating with other builders, other people in the industry to bring together what you're doing is really just showing others that it isn't competition. It's collaboration, even if you're both builders or you're both whatever trade. And I think the more of that we see, the more the trade space and the building space will be like, oh, actually, I can have a conversation with him about how he's doing something and not feel like I'm going to go steal his clients or something.
Yep.
And just to see that change, like I've worked with tradies for, I think it's 13 years actually, come 1st of July. And I've definitely seen that shift, and it's so great to see. My in-laws also had a building company. I always joke, if you look at my family tree, every male is in the trade space in some way, shape or form. And that shift, I think, I think about my retired in-laws, their business would have looked very different had they had the collaboration that we have the opportunity to have today. And I think we almost have a responsibility to make sure that we keep doing things like this, keep letting others know that it can be different. It doesn't have to be hard. Of course, it's not perfect and easy all the time, but to always be listening to podcasts, looking at YouTube, reaching out to different people and, following them on Instagram and those sorts of things to just get a sense of that there is another option, and we're not just stuck in where we are and it isn't all doom and gloom. So that's why I was super excited when you were telling me about this in one of our Profit First sessions, and wanted to have you on here on my podcast. The more we collaborate, the more we are able to change the industry, the more we are able to make our lives better, change our children's lives, change our communities, and so on. And I think it's just, I never thought I would have a podcast. I have never been one to want to stand up in front of people. But over time, when I realized the key to change is education, I was like, oh, actually, then I need to do this. And the more, there'd be people listening to this and listening to your podcast as well, be like, oh, I could never do that. I could never do that thing. It's like your clients love seeing you build stuff, seeing the progress, seeing all of that. It doesn't have to be perfect and polished and pretty. You just have to collaborate, reach out, get the message out, and also that educate your clients so they have a little bit of a better idea of what goes into some of the things that, some of the processes that your clients go through.
Yes, even the clients, like a client, well, no matter what they're doing, are going to have to take a leap of faith to appoint their builder. If you're thinking of becoming a builder, you're going to have to take a leap of faith in yourself to actually back yourself in and go start a business and have people work for you. You work for people, handle money, know all the building codes. At the end of the day, when you're a builder, the buck stops with you. Doesn't matter whether it's money, building something, having trades on site, be responsible for work being carried out. The buck always stops with the builder. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what part of the industry you're in. The buck stops with you. And if you can't I know for me, if I had nothing to do with the building industry and I was going to go and build a house, I would much rather be working with a builder that's going to openly be talking to other people in the industry. They're going to be actively out there telling people what they're doing, because that would have to give some sort of trust that, okay, well, hang on, they're being open. They're going to, if they can talk about this on a podcast, or they can do this as an Instagram story or something like that. It all makes a massive difference. I think for us, with what we're trying to do with Build Insite, if we can just help one person with one conversation, or display something that might help them achieve a better result on a build, or not make mistakes in their well-being and neglect themselves and take the crap out on their loved ones, and then all of a sudden your life's in turmoil, and I think if you don't have a rounded lifestyle and you're running a business, eventually something's going to give, and usually it's going to be your family or yourself. You'll always probably push because you've got an obligation to build a house for somebody, but realistically everybody can suffer, and it's unfortunate because we're through some hard times in the building industry, but I just don't think it has to be as hard as it is. We've networked with a lot of people Australia-wide in the building industry, and I think there's some amazing people doing some awesome things. I think, though, a lot of it comes down to confidence. Is just to, like I said, take that leap of faith, get past the hard part, and you put the work in, and it's going to get easier.
And as you said, if you can just help one person, even if that's all you ever help, which obviously there's going to be far more than that, but that one person still has family, friends, and so on that they would pass information on to. So effectively that one person has a ripple effect. And it's something that, and I'm sure you'll notice this too when your podcast is live and so on, I could say something that is so simple and feels very basic to me, and I will get emails and messages from people going, oh my gosh, that one little thing you said just like changed my whole perspective on something, and now I've been able to like ask my accountant better questions, or do this or that or whatever else, and that just comes from us just being willing and open to talk about the ups and downs, the good and the bad. Like anyone, my first business, which was my bookkeeping business, which I still have, I come about profit first because it sucked. As I said, self-employed parents, was never going to work for myself. And then I did. So then I promised myself I wouldn't be like everybody else. And then guess what it was? And then that's when I went searching and found profit first. And had I not done that, had I just gone with the flow and just went, oh, this is how it is, like I wouldn't have had the opportunity to fix that business and then also get to do what I do now with my profit first coaching clients. And I think for anyone listening on my podcast or your podcast who's in the building space who thinks, oh, I've got nothing to say, or nothing important to say, you would be surprised. You have so much more knowledge than you realize, and you just need to make sure that we're communicating that to the industry, your colleagues, your friends, your family, because just that one person that you do change could make such a difference.
Massive difference. And we all get into like business for, most of the time for flexibility and a lifestyle that, let's be honest, like you probably can't get if you work, 9 to 5. And this is not just a builder's thing. This is like any industry. But it's a lot harder than that because you've got to put a lot more hours in there and not seen. And, unless you've got the right things set up, then are you getting paid for that? Or, you're valuing your time correctly. And I know for myself with, 4 young kids, I probably used to feel guilty a little bit when I started wanting to like be at a school drop off or go to a sports thing and it clashed with work. It'd be like, oh, hang on, I'm doing this, but I'm not there. The guys are on site, or the team's doing this, and I'm stepping away. But the reality is behind the scenes, people don't see me. Before the birds are up in the morning doing things, and late at night and weekends might not socialise as much at certain times because I'm head down, ass up, working away and making things happen. But I think that all comes down to how you want to run a business. And setting these things up properly. And I know, like, just having these conversations with you and Profit First, like, I think we ended up settling on setting up like 11 bank accounts or something like that, just so we could go, okay, how do we really want to customize how we want to run every single job, and how's that going to look? And I mean, for us, as you know, Katie, I don't handle all that all the time because I've got our bookkeeper, Cherie, that we've got there, and we've got a great accountant with Sean, and you got to have a team around you. You can't just do it all by yourself. And I think that's where we really were encouraged with the conversations with you a while ago, and being on board has been a fantastic experience.
And and anyone who's listened to me for more than 3 seconds will have heard me talk about your financial team all the time. But I also think you're a really good example of, there's a difference between building the financial team and then hands off and going, oh, it's all, they have to do everything, as opposed to doing what you do and go, okay, I've got my great accountant, my great bookkeeper, I'm learning about Profit First now, and then how do we, as we said, customize it to work for your business, but also so it's easy for the bookkeeper and the accountant and yourselves. It doesn't have to be all hands off or all hands on deck. Everybody has their area of specialty. And as you say, like, for any bookkeepers or accountants who may be listening, you probably would have nearly fallen off your chair of the mention of 11 bank accounts. But for this business, that is the best number of bank accounts. So both Dean and Darren can see exactly what's going on. As soon as they open their internet banking, they can see what's happening. And one of the things we do, and what I did in this instance as well, I got in contact with the boys' bookkeeper. We had a chat. I explained how it worked, explained how we set it up so it's not extra work for her. And she's amazing as well, which is always super exciting when somebody has an amazing bookkeeper and accountant. And we worked as a team. Like, my role is to help Dean and Darren set up Profit First in their business so that it makes their financial lives easier. My role is also to make sure that I am part of that team and that I have really open conversations with bookkeeping, accounting, without anyone feeling like I'm treading on their toes or they're treading on my toes. Like, that's not how we work when we build our financial team. We're all working together to help the boys achieve whatever their financial goals are. And I think that's something that still gets missed, and there's still a lot of reservations with bookkeepers and accountants sometimes because they don't understand the system, and nor do they need to, but just to be, again, communicating, be open and honest with who does what and why we're doing it, and get them on board to help you achieve your goals and your dreams, because otherwise it's really, really hard, and it doesn't have to be as hard as so many have it at the moment. And that's one thing I see so often, and more so, the ATO is cracking down much more consistently over the last few months with ATO payment plans and all those types of things. And if you don't have a really good relationship with your bookkeeper and your accountant, it can go really, really bad really, really quickly. You don't have to know everything, but you just have to be willing to be like, hey, can you explain this to me, or explain that to me, or why is this like that? I mean, I think that's something both you and Darren do really, really well. Like, you the first ones to say, I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but Cherie will know this, or Sean will know that. Can you ask this? Let's come back. And then we come back and we have a conversation around it. And I think if more builders and trades could take that approach, so many of the financial situations would be improved just through that communication piece.
Yeah, having those discussions is like so vital for us because there's so many things, moving parts to business, and if we don't have the right people around us to help us make the right decisions, it's gonna, 9 times out of 10 it'd end up in disaster. But I think we're able to actually get calculated decisions as we move forward and really keep things on an upward trend rather than sort of, I suppose, not knowing what the future holds. And goal setting, something we always talk about in Build Insite as well. And I definitely know for myself personally, like I want to have goals that sort of scare me, because otherwise it's like, what's going to make me go, I don't want to be, I'm not a complacent person. So, having those goals tied down to know where you're at, then gives you options to be able to sit down with yourself and your financial team to sit down and say, all right, well, this is what I want to do next year, and next financial year, we might need to look at spending on a certain part of your business, so that you can kind of then have those conversations around tax. And I was going to say, Katie, like the funniest thing about setting up the off track for a second, but setting up the 11 bank accounts, I'm pretty sure I told you this, but setting up the with the bank, and they were pressing me on. It wasn't too bad. It's not like they were treating me like an alien as such, but there was quite a few talks about ensuring, there's money laundering issues in the world and stuff like that. And I just kind of chuckled at them. And they said to me, "What's so funny?" And I said, "Wouldn't it be nice to have money to launder?" But no criminal activities involved with this podcast, I can say. But apart from that, it was all really easy to set up. And I know now we sit back and we can, run it and customize things as we proceed. So that's been a fantastic part of it. But I had a question for you. What drove you to? And you touched on before family being involved with building, but what was your biggest factor in kind of being involved with Profit First and the passion around it? Like, you're doing the podcast, you're actively speaking with a lot of people in the industry, so there's obviously a great deal of passion behind that.
Yeah, a couple of things. It came from a need, as I mentioned in my bookkeeping business. I always say, like, between the 3 and 5 year mark is often when people go, "Oh shit, is this it?" Like, like, this is not what I thought it would be. And I got to that 2.5, 3 year mark and went, this is not what I had planned it to be. I had a financial background. I was a financial planner before I had my children. Like, I knew numbers, and I'd still had a business that was not financially viable. And then that's when I decided that I would either have to do something about it or go get a job. By that stage, anyone who's been self-employed for a couple of years knows that going and get a job is usually not an option. And so at the time, a business mentor of mine mentioned the book Profit First. Mike had actually just released it, I think 6 months earlier. So I read it, went, this is amazing, started to implement, stopped, went, let's read it again, let's implement again, started, stopped, third time lucky. And when I implemented it correctly in my bookkeeping business, it just made such a change. And for me, the reason why I started my bookkeeping business after swearing black and blue I would never work for myself was because as a financial planner, I worked specifically with self-employed people, and they'd come to me 5-10 years out of retirement and go, "I'm ready to retire soon. Can you help me?" And they'd worked their butts off their entire life and had very, very little to show for it. And so I thought if I could help them with their bookkeeping, because at that time cloud accounting had happened and Xero had happened, then I'd be able to give them all the up-to-date numbers and they could make better financial decisions, and miraculously they'd have all this money to be able to retire on. And then I realized that there was a piece of the puzzle missing. So I was doing Profit First in my own business. And then when I realized that that piece was missing, I was like, oh, hang on, this has changed so much my own business. Let's start doing it. So I become certified a little over 6 years ago and haven't turned back. I love what I do. I love that I get to work with businesses and pull their financials apart and put it back together in a system that is so much simpler than what they've ever had before. I love that they can be on holidays and just look at their bank accounts and know exactly what's going on. I love that they no longer are worried about how they're going to pay that bill, that, GST bill, super, all of those things. Now, I always say, it's not a magic wand. It doesn't just fix everything overnight, but it gives you a really structured step-by-step of what you need to fix first, which just makes it so much easier for business owners. Because we do have 400 things going on, we've got a step-by-step guide that we customize for them and their business. And as I said, the trade space, I've always been around tradies. I spend some of the best years of my childhood are in sheds watching my dad and his mates build motors and cars and boats and race boats and all that type of thing. And all of them had a trade of some description. All of them were self-employed and all of them would work 10, 12-hour days and then have a few hours on the weekend for their passions. And I just felt if I could just do one small piece to change that and improve that, then I would. And here
And
we
it's
are.
such a massive piece, and it's probably a common topic that comes up with no matter who you talk to in the industry. And yeah, go back to that whole idea that most builders were tradies before they started a building business. And we've seen, like, talk about pandemics. We've seen a pandemic of you know, so many builders going out of business, and we're not just talking the little guys, we're talking the big guys as well. So it's been a bad time for the industry. And I know, we have a questionnaire that we send out to all of our inquiries, and one of those questions are, do you have any concerns with the journey of going through the build, like a build? And it'd be such a high percentage of people that write back, and we're concerned that our builder's going to go out of business. And I think, yeah, it's definitely a part of, as I said, I'm passionate about. I've got a lot of passion for business as well. Like, as building, it took me probably some time to kind of separate, we're building, but that's the business, this is the build, and they're completely different parts. Like, yes, they entwine, but we've had this conversation ourselves in our own sessions. But yes, like, for me, we need that information, and we go all the way back to our proposals that are quite in depth. But it's hard to sort of say, all right, what's the extent we want to do? Do we want to track every nut and bolt and nail and screw? Or do we want to get an idea to make sure that we're tracking this and understanding that our materials and expenses are covered, and we can see where our profits are? And okay, if we've gone backwards on a component of this project, why? And what are the reasons? And I feel like that's something that you handle really well. Like, you definitely can customize that to people on different extents that they want to see, and the data they want to track, which is probably credit to yourself.
And I think it's interesting, a couple of years ago, so my dad was a motor mechanic. I always wanted to be a motor mechanic. Again, put me in a shed with a motor and I'm in my element. And then I ended up going into financial services, and a client said to me a few years ago, he's like, actually, you're just like financial mechanic. Like, you pull our businesses apart and then you figure out all the crap we don't need, and then you make everything work properly, and then you put it back together. And I went, yeah, that's what I do. I get to work with numbers and make things more efficient and along the way. And I think that just really comes from understanding building, understanding trades, understanding what you all go through, because I can ask questions that allow me to get a greater insight into what's going on. So, and I always say this when I first have a conversation with somebody that's working with me, I'm like, I'm going to ask you some questions throughout this process. You're probably going to think I'm a little bit crazy with some of them, but trust me, they'll all tie in down the track, because there are things that I'll ask that you're like, that's weird, because I'm already thinking ahead of the other steps that we're going to do, and then how can we make that as simple and efficient as possible, to make sure that you can get the information that you need. I don't believe that we should be spending hours upon hours a week on our financials. And I work in the financial space. Like, we don't have to be spending hours and hours. Like, literally, when you've got Profit First set up in your business, 15 minutes a week max. That's all you need. Gives you a really snapshot where we're at, what's not working, what do we need to focus on. Okay, great. Now let's focus on that for the next week or however many it may be. Come back following week. How are we going? What's next? And it just gives you that clear direction of what to work on, which I find is super helpful, particularly for our builders who are juggling, 100 different things at a time. I
And a
also
lot of
like to make.
builders and tradies are going home and doing this stuff, like, probably potentially after their kids have gone to bed, and they've, unwound with, bedtime, maybe a couple of beers or something like that. So, if it's not simple for most people, it's not going to be successful, and it'll probably leave it, and it'll just go back to their old ways. And I think that's such a part of it, that we use Zero, and you've basically helped us set up the systems within our Xero, and it all reconciles, and we can kind of set those templates up from when an invoice comes in to then break it apart and put things in different parts, and it's done. It's not rocket science. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
And I always joke, I'm like, it's getting your bookkeeping system set up properly is just like the foundations of a house. Like if you don't have the right number of foundations at the right depth and the right, all of those bits and pieces, you can build this beautiful house, but eventually it's going to fall down. And nobody cares about the foundations. Everyone just wants the foundations done so the slab can go on, so then it can kind of look like a house. But if we don't focus on those first, everything else is going to be a bit rocky. And that's what I think about bookkeeping. Again, I've had a bookkeeping business for almost 13 years. But I don't love the bookkeeping process. That's why I have an amazing team of bookkeepers who love that. I love how do we customize the system? But if we don't have that set up properly, everything else you do on top of that, whether it's your sales, your marketing, your hiring, everything will be affected if your bookkeeping isn't sorted out properly. And it doesn't have to be complicated. If you've got an amazing bookkeeper, they will be able to nail that really, really simply. And then lay a profit first on that, and we add in 11 bank accounts. It actually adds maybe a minute worth of bookkeeping with 11 bank accounts, and that's with some time to spare.
And it's crazy because if I say less is more, and you said, I say that straight after you say 11 bank accounts, people will be like, that's madness. But when it's all set up and it's flowing, it's not. It's actually really is less is more. It's all the grunt work is done, and it's easier to track. And technology is our friend these days. So why shouldn't that transfer into how you're going to deal with your finances? Which, when you're running a business, that is the key. We talk about scheduling and everything, but we need to schedule and understand when we're hitting progress payments and how that's what deposits need to be paid and accounts need to be paid and so forth. So, it's definitely helps with a balancing act of running a successful, profitable business. That's for sure.
Yeah, it certainly does. And that's why I always joke when we talk about how many bank accounts. I'm like, actually, the more bank accounts you have, the easier it is to run your business financially, which again sounds very, counterintuitive. But when everything's set up correctly, it makes it so much simpler.
Absolutely.
So to wrap up then, so your podcast, Build Insite, by the time this goes to air on my podcast, will be out. So where will we find you on Instagram, podcast, all of those places?
So build.insite, and you can see the sign behind me. So if you're viewing on social media or YouTube, but build.insite, INSITE. That's we've got our YouTube channel going with more and more more build related videos coming. We're showing a lot of insights behind the scenes. We're having some, really great conversations with a lot of people in the industry. So there's a lot coming on the podcast. We've got a website coming, and we are going Australia wide. So we've got currently one of the guys is about to go to Lithuania and really go and showcase some building parts of the industry that are coming to Australia a lot more frequently now. So that's exciting. But podcast is going to be live, or it's live now, I think. I'll check my phone after this, but it's exciting times.
Awesome. And finally, thank you for coming on my podcast. And also thank you for being amazing clients. But also thanks for getting out of your comfort zone and doing something that will change the industry, even though you don't know how much yet, but still giving it a go. And I think that's the key, that we just can't be, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because otherwise the alternative is not very fun. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it. And if we can help one person out of our conversation today, it's worthwhile for both of us. So look forward to chatting with you soon with Back and Builders, but also we're definitely going to be speaking again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Cheers.
Let's cue the disclaimer. It's Anthony here from Build Insite, and I need to let you know that myself and the Build Insite team are in no way, shape or form qualified to give you personal or specific business advice. We strongly encourage you seek out the use of professionals for products or when you are making personal or business decisions. Everything discussed during the Build Insight podcast is our own and the guest opinion and personal experience and is of a general nature only.